Items, discussion item number 1. Discussion regarding proposed ordinance 0222348 regarding regulating unsolicited materials, written materials.
All right.
Anthony.
Okay, so this is a continuation of a discussion we've been having since, well, before I was here, from about 2010, about unsolicited written materials that are delivered within the city limits. And, you know, the discussion has been, what can the city do to prevent them from being haphazardly delivered? There's some periodicals that get thrown, usually on a weekly basis. That usually, the way they're delivered either in a driveway, on the yard, or in the street. So we've gotten a lot of citizen complaints, and so this has prompted a lot of memos and correspondence between the city attorney's office and council on the issue. The last meeting we had was in March, and council gave the direction of continuing forth with an ordinance that regulates where the materials can be delivered to, specifically to unsolicited materials. So here's some of the background. We've done a lot of memos over the years. Here's some pictures that maybe I took just driving around after a rainstorm, showing that these do end up in the storm grates in the city, and logically they would also probably be ending up in the stormwater system. So it also, importantly, it's, you know, a lot of people consider it to be visual blight because they're unsolicited, meaning that the resident of the property did not want them in the first place, right? A lot of the times people don't pick them up, right? So they stay where they were delivered until someone either picks them up, and a lot of the times it could take a couple of weeks, or you just wait till the next rainstorm and then it gets kind of washed away and it's someone else's problem. And like I said, it also ends up in the street, and then by the time, you know, it gets found, it's not usable, it's not readable because it's been rained on, driven on, or something like that. And then stormwater. So one of the things the city attorney's office recommended is before we go forward with an ordinance, we do want to do some fact finding to make sure we know a little bit more about what the actual impact is to the city. And based on that feedback, we can determine whether or not it would be warranted to go forward with an ordinance. What we found, we did get a large number of pictures. Our stormwater crew and our street crew was really great in helping us with this. Basically, they would go and they would clean these storm grates after a rain event, or, you know, just to make sure that they're flowing properly. And I told them, anytime one of you, if you have the time, just snap a picture anytime you see one of these materials in around the storm grate. So that's what we did. We got a lot of pictures. So we did get great evidence showing that this is making its way into the stormwater system, and it's contributing to the blockages of those systems. Here's some more pictures. A lot of the times they're unrecognizable at the end of it. More pictures. Okay, so what did we do? I gave you a little bit of a background last time we had this discussion. There is an ordinance in the Lexington Fayette County government, and this has kind of been tested in the Sixth Circuit. They made an ordinance that regulated where you could put these materials, and you had like one of 6 places you could put them, basically on a porch, attached to the front door, through a mail slot. Basically places where, 1, it'll ensure the residents actually receive these materials, and 2, they'll know that the materials have been delivered, and then finally, where they probably have a very good chance of not entering into either the street, the sidewalk, or the stormwater system. And so that was litigated in the Sixth Circuit. We were in the 10th Circuit. That was litigated there on appeal. The circuit court found that it was a perfectly reasonable time, place, and manner restriction, and it upheld the ordinance of the Lexington Fayette County government. So what we did is we basically just took that one and then put it in ordinance form. We wanted to keep it as close to what they had as possible because it's more predictive that way. The Sixth Circuit already upheld a very similar ordinance. It would have persuasive value if this were litigated and if it went to the 10th Circuit, okay? So this is the extent of the ordinance, really. So it regulates it to just being delivered in these places. It does, and, we have to put in there, we're not trying to go after the federal government, does not apply to USPS. And it has a penalty range of $50 to $750 upon conviction. So that's something important to note, that in order to enforce this, it would be a conviction, it would be a criminal matter. That's the only difference between what was in the Lexington ordinance, because they have the ability to do civil penalties instead of a criminal charge. In Oklahoma, if you have a violation of an ordinance, that is going to be a criminal charge. That's just the way Oklahoma is different than some other states. So,
Councilman?
Did I have a question? I know you're not allowed to put things in mailboxes, but what if these people started doing that? How would we?
how would we enforce that?
Yeah.
Well, that would more be probably the USPS or the federal government who would be enforcing that. So
That'd be something we would like report to them or?
could be, yeah.
Okay.
So if they started putting it without permission or without going through
Or
the
like
normal process.
Could they like hook it on the mailbox, like on the little thing? The
I
flag?
mean, no, I bet not all mailboxes would have those. And there's gonna be some addresses that don't even have mailboxes. So I would still be concerned because it's right over the street and that's kind of a precarious place to put it. It might still end up there.
I've actually seen it on mailboxes.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
so-
that also could be about other people in the neighborhood who
Yeah.
are tired of them, because I do get a lot of complaints and I've had talked to people who, they say, every Saturday I go through my neighborhood and I pick up every single one I
Sure.
see because I'm tired of seeing them. So
Could be that
that
too.
could be that too, and they're just like, here you go, this is yours.
Yeah.
So
True. Fair.
yeah, but I mean, the intent of this, right, is to just make sure that it's in a place that's probably not going to end up in the stormwater system.
Sure.
Right? And that's what I would be worried about with that. And-
Also, Anthony, before you get started, what about campaign materials? Excuse me, I know we had a discussion on that last time, and we didn't think that it was applicable to campaign. We'd have to do it this way, which is kind of what everybody does anyway, puts them
Yeah.
on the front door.
I mean-
But if there were other things that, they fly off the door or something like that, would those campaign materials be?
I mean, and in that case, like, if you have, 50 houses that you went through and you put them on a door knocker, right, every single time, and you have one fly off, we're gonna be able to tell,
Yeah.
right? That you tried to do it right. And this isn't going to probably eliminate completely the problem, but it's going to be a much better solution than, just banning them all outright. Now, if it is an unsolicited written material, so if you're giving anything, if it's whatever it is, right, and it's unsolicited, meaning that the resident didn't ask for it, and it's written, right, in some sort of material, then that would fall under this ordinance. So if it's a campaign flyer, that could be potentially under this ordinance. What I would say is you're not gonna run into those problems because I guarantee you're probably not gonna get votes if you do it this way, right? The way that these periodicals have been operating. So I've never gotten a complaint about that. We have had some situations. I think there was a business who, they had Ziploc baggies and they stapled their business card on it and they put rocks in it. And then they just threw it on your driveway. And then that's how they were soliciting their business.
That's one way to do it.
So that would fall. That would be an example, right? Because it had the little card on it. That wouldn't happen. We got a lot of complaints about that person too. So it could fall under it, but I'm not worried about it. For what that's worth. Okay, so now let's get to the enforcement piece, okay? Because this is probably the most challenging part about this ordinance and how we are going about things, because you will have to enforce it, okay? Or I shouldn't say you will have to enforce it, but it's expected that it will be enforced, right? The difference between, again, this is a criminal matter in Oklahoma, where it was originally in Lexington, Fayette, they were able to do it civilly. The burden of proof is a lot lower. They were able to have a presumption that whoever's name was on the, written material, that's who you could cite, right? We can't do that because we have a higher burden of proof, right? So what we would actually have to do, if PD were wanting to enforce this, for example, either we would get a complaint and saying, hey, there's a red SUV that's delivering these materials and it is not on my front porch, right? Then PD could respond. PD could do proactive response, and then they could probably pull over the person who's actually delivering them, right? Because we can't necessarily go directly to the corporation. And I also, as a prosecutor, would rather not have a charge against a corporation because that's not the best defendant. You can't have a warrant out for a corporation, right? If they don't show up to court. So it'd need to be a person, which is likely the person delivering it, and we're gonna have to catch that person in the act, right? The last time this was in front of council, or 2 sessions ago, I think I had 2 council members who volunteered to do a stakeout. That's what needed to be done to fix this issue, so, but just understand that there are barriers to enforcement, okay? There could be some civil enforcement that we do, like I think there's a state law out there, or a state case law that says any continual violation of a city ordinance is a, irreparable harm. So the only issue is that, if we did do proactive civil litigation in order to prevent them from doing this in the future, that could raise First Amendment issues, right? So it might not be entirely successful. Or we could run into issues that we weren't aware of when we passed this, right? So that could be difficult as well. However, at the same time, this is an effort to solve the problem, even if there are barriers to enforcement. But that is an issue I want to make you guys aware of. And with that, I think I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have of the remaining.
Yes, sir.
Is this an issue where you see the state preempting us on this?
Not necessarily. I mean, print media isn't super prevalent anymore, so I don't know if this would really be an issue that the state would care that much about, because it doesn't impact like political material that much.
Sure.
I don't know if they would have a vested interest in doing so, but you never know.
Just curious.
Yes, ma'am.
Me, just curious. For my own knowledge, because I've had a lot of people ask, they're like, I have no soliciting, and people still do it. Like, they're like, that's illegal. Does having no solicitation make it illegal for them if they wanted to do something? Like, I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I would put a sign up for everything if that's the case. Like,
yeah. So, I mean, would it be soliciting if they just left it on your front porch? Maybe, maybe not. I think we also have I think that's more geared towards like door-to-door salesmen, right? I don't know if that would necessarily fall under this particular.
because people don't like when you leave things on their doors.
That's true.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Councilman?
I think, I know I've been in several of the discussions about this at the committee level. And I think the thing that we've constantly struggled with was how do we regulate this? How do we think about drafting some kind of ordinance? And I really appreciate the method that you've tried to do this with. I mean, we talked a lot about First Amendment issues around, what people can and can't say, what can be distributed. And I think personally from, being a part of those conversations that this is the best case of what we can do to try to regulate, all of the, what I would call trash in,
Yep.
on our front yards and our, stormwater system, all of that kind of stuff. So like, trying to navigate this, I guess, this fine little line that we have to say, hey, you can't just be in a car and throw them on, everybody's yard. Because sometimes 3 end up in one yard because they blow around. And so really, who are they trying to target was the question. So I appreciate that line that you're trying to kind of walk. And I understand that there's an enforcement issue, but also like this does provide some intent for us to say that this is not okay. This is how we're trying to regulate this. I understand the challenges on, the legal side and things like that, but I think that having something documented like this, right, time, place, manner, with the intent, I think it's a positive step in the right direction, showing that we're doing and trying to address some of our citizens' concerns about this issue.
What do you need from us, Anthony?
Well, this is going to be first reading tonight, and then it'll be second reading on the 27th. 27th. So I don't need anything from you guys. That's up to you at this point. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Appreciate you.
Any more questions for Anthony? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Item number 2, discussion regarding the emergency shelter lease located at 109 West Gray Street. Who's leading that discussion?
That's a good question.
Oh.
You want to go first? I was going to double check with Anthony beforehand, but I didn't know if you wanted to lead the discussion since we talked about it last week as well. We know the contract's coming up for its term ends, the end of June, and so part of tonight's discussion is related around that.
Yeah, sure. And so with the budget action taken earlier today as well, we know that 718 Porter is being looked at as a potential, as a location for a shelter as well. So we just need to get some feedback on how, if we want to extend the current contract for this location, how far out, and kind of discuss what that transition would look like to 718 Porter.
Okay,
Has it,
please.
has it always been a 90-day extension?
No.
Or is that something arbitrary that we just came up with, or council came up with?
I think we were trying to get through the end of the fiscal year, and 90 days is where the math worked out and with the last one. But you can extend it as long as you need to.
So the main issue that I've been hearing from the property owners and taxpayers downtown that have property or businesses, that the shelter could be causing a disruption just by the presence. I mean, walking up here to just to the back door, I was panhandled. Now, that is an issue for a lot of folks. I've received a lot of emails. And so what is the city prepared to do to address the taxpayers and the property owners? Because look, we're paying $55,000 a month. Should they expect some sort of return or protection as taxpayers? And so that's what I'd like to know. That's what a lot of folks who are watching this tonight would like to know. Are we protecting our investments, which is downtown Norman?
And that's really, I think, a discussion for council. The contract, as it stands currently, just addresses the shelter operations, not activities that are occurring outside of the shelter and off the shelter property or around the shelter as people wait for it to open or after it closes in the morning. So it's really focused more on the shelter operation itself.
Councilmember Grant?
I was gonna say, do we think it'll take 90 days to get 718 up to speed?
I think within 90 days, we should be pretty darn close, as long as we don't run into any lead time on any materials. We're just talking sheetrock, a little bit of electrical, some HVAC, that type of thing. So we don't think it's anything that should be in short supply. The basic repairs don't really require any architectural work. We do think the opportunity to have an architect take a peek on the inside, and since basically the structure is a big barn, you can move all the interior walls however needed without any structural concerns, just to make sure you can control ingress, egress, and make sure people aren't going in places they're not supposed to be. But I do think within 90 days that is realistic.
And could we draft the kind of contract that has language that answers our community's questions about what we're doing with that location? Like we discussed vinyl window clings to beautify and get rid of the boards. We talked about seating, shaded area outside that is in the back and not blocking the sidewalk, all with the mindset that we will be transitioning to another spot.
So I think this is I'm glad Catherine's sitting here at the table with us, the ability to make some modifications to demonstrate that, yeah, the goal of the city of Norman is to be the best neighbors possible. And we do see some immediate changes that can be made. Some would be, we can have those conversations with the operator in the agreement, and some just direction to staff to say, get rid of the boards, put the glass back up, put the vinyls on the glass to keep it more secure, and move the fence. Those are things that staff can do ASAP. Probably don't need those necessarily in the agreement.
Right.
But staff will take council direction and go make that happen.
And then also to make sure we were compliant with the number that's actually staying there, and to adjust that so we're in compliance.
Yeah, and so the number we have for the current facility is based on the fire marshal's assessment of what can be safely housed in terms of numbers. So we would want to do a similar exercise on 718 Porter to make sure that we have a good idea of what those numbers are and can be, and then update the contract accordingly when we move into that spot.
Okay. I would also say that in talking with the downtown community, that many of them are supportive of moving into a location that addresses day and night issues. So,
It's going to be a day shelter.
We're done. Councilmember Ford?
I would like to address our operator, Miss April. Might I ask you a few questions? Okay.
Where do you want me to go?
Come a little bit, I don't know.
You'll have to be near a speaker.
Mayor,
Thank you, okay.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to excuse myself. I think I'll be back for the 6:30 meeting, but I've got a personal matter I've got to deal with.
Sure.
Okay, so when we talked about moving to our current place right now, the Parks Department just they trashed that building. I mean, it was just, I'm just kidding, Jason. Anyway, it wasn't in a good shape, right? It wasn't in a good shape. And I asked you, like, what do you need? And you were like, 4 walls, right? Just let us in. We just need beds. Okay. So the Porter location, not in the best shape. I understand that. Is it something, have you seen it? Have you toured it?
No.
Have you not? Okay. Is there a way, Mr. City Manager, that we can get that, like, tomorrow?
ASAP.
Kind of going? Kind of thing tonight? What are y'all doing?
Really dark in there tonight.
So would it be possible to July 1, when it executes, Mr. City Manager, do you think, if Ms. Dosher thinks that it's okay, could we move into it July 1 in a space kind of that's operable at the moment, not? Or no?
There are a couple issues. One, we would want the fire marshal to go through the building
Oh,
for
sure.
this type of occupancy.
Sure.
There's some plumbing needs that we need to make sure are addressed.
Okay.
And the sheetrock, when we discovered mold inside the building, they removed sheetrock about knee high throughout much of the building, which would make it very difficult for the operator to keep spaces separate for ladies and gentlemen inside the building.
Okay.
But quickly, there could be work done
Okay.
to get it operational and then have it finalized during the day when there aren't clients in that space. So I think that could be done in a coordinated manner, but we'd be happy to work closely with your operator and work out those details.
Daryl, can I add a few things before we go in
Please.
there too far? So, we have water damage, extensive
Sure.
water damage in there, and everything about 2 foot high is cut off on sheetrock. It's exposed a lot of electrical, and not to mention that I'm a little hesitant on the 90 days because I think we're gonna have to prepare a bid package because it's gonna far exceed our $50,000.
Sure.
To get everything.
500.
No, I'm saying
50,000
anything
For
above
competition.
$50,000 is gonna have to go out to bid.
Yeah,
So that's gonna add some time. We have to put together a scope of work. We're gonna have to go out to bid, and then we're gonna have to get contractor scheduled to get in there, not to mention if there's any design changes inside the building. So I just wanna make sure everybody's aware of that. It's not, I don't see
I
any way
didn't think
feasible to
90
be in there
days
July
was gonna be
1st.
realistic,
No,
but,
no, It's
okay.
gonna be tough.
So we decide to extend it 90 days, we still need more time. What kind of lead time would you as the operator need to get moved? To make sure that we can just smoothly transition?
So, I would say we would need probably a 2-week time span where we would get everything moved and transitioned and then restructure our operational manual. We would probably need to relocate our guest, whoever's there at the time, for a short period of time because we only have those beds. So we would
Right.
have to take those down and move those
So
beds.
not operable for that
For a
transition?
couple of weeks,
Okay.
yeah, in which we would need to either put them in motels or find another location for them to be.
Okay, thank you. While she's here, anyone?
Thank you.
You were in the queue.
Councilmember Pico?
I mean, that was pretty much along my same line of questioning. Was there any possibility that we could get in there faster than 90 days? Even if we phased it in, like did half the first floor right off the bat. I mean, basically spent $50,000 or up to our limit of what we can do in-house and get the ball rolling. I personally have heartburn extending it another 90 days at the current location, but I get it, we need it, and it's a step towards a more permanent location. I just wish we could get over there a little quicker.
And one other thing I would recommend for this location, because it's not part of the city campus, it's a new property to us, is looking at what we need to do in terms of zoning.
Right.
And right now, it's, the parking lot, it looks like on GIS is RM2, and the front, the building piece is C2. Municipal use can be a special use, and zoning categories, but we may want to look at something different. So if we could have a chance to kind of go back and outline those steps as well, and kind of a timeline maybe for a bid package, and identify after a tour of Ms. Dozier what needs to be done, and come back to council, that might give you guys a better idea of how quickly we can move. If we extend the current agreement 90 days, but we can get in there sooner, we can always amend it and make those adjustments when we need to.
Well, there's that, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna ask, would this be, could you qualify this as a boarding house? Because I think that is an allowable use in C2, if I remember right.
A hotel?
We've looked at that.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
it is
we'll look
sprinkled.
at all the options.
That's good. That's good to know it's already sprinkled.
And if it's a temporary solution, then we want to be careful too about the rezoning it
Sure.
to something that's going to make it harder for us to sell later.
That's actually why I asked.
Yeah,
'cause I mean,
so we'll look at all those options and come back with some suggestions.
Well,
And get,
it gets curiouser and curiouser as we go through.
yeah, and it's weird that it's split that way.
No, that was my question, was that zoning, so is that, you answered my question for me, I mean,
Read your
so
mind.
how, 'cause you heard me ask her, probably, how fast can we move this, city manager? If it's a zoning issue and it's not a boarding house question, this all plays into either how we extend the 90 days for the current location, how fast can we get this rezoned into a PUD? 90 days.
It's a popular timeline.
So if we do that, are we still gonna send out those notices, the 350-foot radius to all the residents and business owners that we're still gonna follow the policy?
Follow the procedure. Yes, sir.
I think it's fair that we notify the businesses and the residents around that area what we plan to be doing. I know we discussed this almost 2 years ago, and I think it was along the same conversation that we were gonna do this anyways, PUD it, and then do the proper notification, let them come out and have their say, and take feedback from the community, which I think is the fairest thing to do.
Well, and I agree. I think there's a lot of this that concerns me, that we're kind of Cadillacing a temporary structure, as you're thinking of it. If we do the vote in November, say, and the people say, go build a shelter somewhere, we've sunk $500,000 into a structure that we're going to now remodel and may lose our investment in. So if we put all kinds of not necessarily fancy stuff, but things that would make it more pleasant to be there.
And we could sell it.
If those things sell, it's kind of like the question on a house. Do I repaint the house and recarpet the house before the next guy gets there? And the answer is usually no, because they want to do their own stuff. And so if they come through, the next operator comes through of that building, or the next buyer of that building, and tears everything else that we did, then we're not, I don't see a way around it, but it's plate spaghetti we've got to undo. Yes, ma'am.
I would say that it was 1.8 million that was budgeted for its remodel, and then we're self-insured, so the sprinkler damage we'd have to fix regardless.
Yeah.
I do hear you on what if we make it this use and somebody comes in and wants something else, but as I understand it, it was county health
It was.
that was interested in it, so it may still be very attractive to a service provider in that county region, or even there were other entities that were talked about who need to spend their COVID funds by 26 who may be interested in it. Because if we do pass a vote in November, we still had the lead time for the purchase of the land, zoning if that's a thing, and then also build time. So it would be a structure we'd be using for at least a couple years.
I would agree with that. It's not going to be immediately wasted money, but I just don't want to put a whole bunch of money into there. I mean, you need kennels, do need a shelter for people to sit under. I think one of the things that the downtowners have made apparent to me is a place that they can go during the day and they can congregate and they can do the things that they want to do. It's not jail. It's just a place to be able to be and not be downtown. And so that's the good that I can see out of this is getting those persons a place to stay. And that parking lot's pretty big.
It's pretty big.
And part of the 500,000, we had talked about creating a proper fence for that area
Yeah.
to delineate the uses. And I don't think it would be out of bounds considering other structures in Ward 4 that have that kind of masonry fence.
Yeah.
Dimensions Academy would be a perfect example of masonry fence.
Yeah, I'm just, that may be a good thing to protect Terra Homeras anyway.
Jane was just saying it's required because this is the Porter corridor, so that will be required for
There
this
you go.
parcel.
Well, that settles the question.
So, there we go.
Okay.
That's why we invited her.
And the, does it give a height on that? Didn't we just do a height thing? Or was that a different kind of fence?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a height on that? Does it have to be an
6
8-foot
foot, 8
fence?
foot,
No.
but Porter Corridor may have its own.
They have their own, but I think that we should probably look at doing the PUD so we can write our own.
Okay.
But at least we'd be putting the wall up, meeting the Porter corridor requirements. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir. Oh,
Ask Schuler.
I missed you. Sorry.
So I guess just to, kind of talk through some of the things that we've been talking about, I think we've all been hearing the challenges that our downtown business owners have been facing during this being the location of our shelter. But I think, many of us agree that we can't go without a shelter. Like, we need to find whatever the next iteration is of the temporary location as we think about what the permanent location is going to be. And as you said, it's probably several years down the road, even if, we put this up to a vote and, figure out, that we're going to appropriate money and how we're going to spend all of that to get a permanent location. But in the meantime, we have to have a solution to continue to offer this service. And I mean, we acquired 718 with the hospital kind of land transfer. And I know that, yes, the county has been interested in it, but I mean, it's been sitting there for 2 years with nobody using it.
Yeah.
And so I think that, we have to make hard decisions about where money is going to be, how we're going to allocate things, but also to have that we are responsive to our business owners, we're responsive to our residents. So talking about the things that we're going to do on the current location to make sure that it is secure, that the access to the building, the way that we do intake is a little bit different, where the queuing is, so not blocking sidewalks, thinking about security and safety on the backside of the current location property. And then also we've talked about writing into, whatever the new location is going to be, like what is the security measures there, like the fencing, like potentially cameras, and providing a space for people to feel safe during the day, and then also couple that with the resource, social work and things like that, I think is really important. But, I understand that people want it to move yesterday.
Yeah.
But that's
on
really
Mars.
not, we're not in a situation where we can do that. We've talked through kind of the zoning piece for 718. We've talked about, what needs to be done on the property, the restrictions that we have as a government to make sure that we have to go out to bid if it's over a certain threshold. Like, I just want people to understand that it's not just like we snap fingers and we can move. Like, this is our intent, and I think that we need to be really explicit about what the intent is moving forward and kind of make good on those promises that we've made. We did appropriate money earlier at the budget to kind of get 718 up to speed. So you say, so I think some of that investment, even if we were to sell the building, is an investment in the potential resale of that property, since we would be responsible for updating, the sheetrock and the electrical and plumbing and kind of all of those things anyway. So some of that money is not lost in that process. I think that it's really important to also remember that the 718 location is right across the street from kind of our Porter Health campus. There will be a 50-bed behavioral health facility there. We've got potentially some, variety care is looking at, putting their location there as well. And so the services that may be needed are adjacent to the property. We've got Salvation Army, which is also operating a shelter within that vicinity. And they're also, doing a capital campaign to expand their footprint. So I think it's pretty, like that location, this is what we had originally talked about, 718. So we're kind of coming to this full circle moment of when we acquired that building for this purpose. So I think in a lot of the conversations that I've had with a couple of other council members and with the city manager and, residents and Catherine, is that, we've got to show, okay, we hear you, we're moving towards a solution. And I think that's what this discussion is really about, and kind of the discussion that we've had last week as well at Oversight. So I hear everybody that it's not maybe moving on the timeline that we, want it to. But I think 90 days is a reasonable time frame to start getting all of these things in motion and showing our intent to move the location.
Yes. Yes, sir.
You're next.
Does Moore or Edmond have a permanent facility like we're discussing? So why is our homeless problem so much worse than theirs? What are we doing wrong? And how can we look at what they're doing right and correct what we're doing?
I mean, those communities are much smaller than ours. We're the third largest city in the state.
Edmond's not too far behind. And if they have probably 90% less homeless than we do, Moore has probably 90% less homeless than we do, then we're doing something wrong. And I think we should be addressing that instead of looking for more ways to attract this type of behavior.
Were you next?
I'm next. April, can you step up, please, again?
I don't mean to do such a.
So,
Sorry.
have you been to this new location yet?
I've not been, no.
Okay, so it's about 30,000, you said 30,000 square foot?
Large facility, yeah.
So, 2 years ago, we had bigger visions for this place, like day use, night use.
Mm-hmm.
So how many beds do you think you can fit into this area?
I just don't know how I could answer that question. I mean,
The
it's.
fire marshal decides, right?
Yeah, it would
Yeah,
have
we
to be
can get
assessed.
them out.
I could tell you that the building we're in right now is much larger than what we're using.
Okay.
I mean, what's the facility, square foot of that
I
building?
did ask the fire marshal, the occupied space for shelter services today is just under 2,800 square feet.
Okay,
That's what we're using, okay.
2,800
Okay.
square feet.
all right. At this Porter location?
No, at
at-
Gray.
Just wanted to clarify.
So he was trying to say, if you did the math,
Yeah.
and maybe we could figure out, I don't know, we could double our capacity potentially.
Because what we're asking the community, the downtown community too as well, and the taxpayers, is that to put the trust in the process that once the Porter Street building gets opened up and built up, that it will be a place for these guys to go during the day and at night potentially and stay, get the services. Look, we know they don't want to be in the street. No sane person wants to sit and go to the bathroom on Main Street. That's mental health, illness, whatever. We know that. Okay, so for the folks that don't want to be there but need a hand up, are you going to like 10x the results you have at the day shelter and get all the relevant agencies there, housing, HUD, VA, everything, so when they're there during the day and through the night, they have that case management where the ultimate goal, I think for everybody, is to get them the help they need, get them to where they need to be at mentally, substance abuse, whatever it is here. Is that still the ultimate goal for what you want to do?
Yeah, I think we've been doing a really good job of that already at the Gray Street location with very limited space. We've increased our social work hours double since we opened and have seen great results. We've been reporting that through Oversight, and you guys get those reports. So the number of people we're seeing enter the workforce, get into housing, access services, engage the VA is just growing, and that's because we're able to do those case management services. So having access to day services, I think is just going to make that easier for us because that's when those services are available within the community. So I think we're already doing a good job of that. We'll just be able to do it better with day services. I just want to respond real quick about one thing. So when we talk about homelessness, a lot of the issues you're hearing are not homelessness issues. They're mental health issues. And we can add 150 more beds to this community if we don't tackle the mental health response to getting a response out to people who are struggling. I mean, somebody getting undressed in the middle of Main Street is not a homelessness issue. That's a mental health issue. If we don't respond to that, then doesn't matter what we do, we're going to still see those issues. But the people that need our help at shelter, that's who's coming to a friend's house. That's who's getting up and going to work. That's who's saying, now that I have a safe bed to sleep in, I don't have to worry about where I'm going to be at night. Now I can go out and use my day productively. And that's what this will do. That's what a new location with an expanded capacity will do. But you're going to have to turn around and address a mental health response if we're going to really tackle these issues that downtowners are seeing.
Right, so I got a follow-up question. We talked about this today.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that back up. You know, so we're putting a lot of trust. People, they want to make sure that the government, the city of Norman is doing the best we can for everybody. Taxpayers, got to be at forefront. We're humans, we got to take care of those that can't take care of themselves. So going to the shelter now, we talked about when they get signed in at 7 o'clock, do they stay in the shelter all night until they're released the next morning? Or do you allow them to get out and go congregate in the sidewalk, anywhere in the streets?
So up until probably a week and a half ago, maybe, they could sit on the sidewalk and smoke and hang out and do the things that people do. And we've just recently kind of asked for all the congregation area to be moved to the east side of the building. So when we open at 5, guests can come in, check in, say, I'm going to be here tonight. And then it's not a prison. And we don't want a prison. You won't get anybody to come to a prison. And then we're just going to have 50 people sleeping on the sidewalks downtown. So yes, they can come and go. They can come in, they can go to the park, they can go to the library, they can go to Tuesday Together, which is a dinner that McFarland hosts every Tuesday night, and then come back and go to bed. If they're on property between any of that time, they have to now be on the east side of the building, not on the sidewalk, and kind of further back toward where the dumpster is so that they're out of, kind of out of just Gray Street way. But yeah, they can come and go, yes.
Well, to be on the record too, when they come back in, do you check them again for drugs, alcohol? So when they leave and they come back, do you screen them for any drug use or prior drug use coming back into the facility or alcohol?
So all of our staff are really educated on observation, like, is this person safe to be here? So if somebody comes in and has alcohol on their breath, that doesn't automatically mean they can't stay. If they can go lay down on their bed and go to sleep and not cause problems, then they can stay. If they're, whatever kind of high they are, if they can stay. And they stay inside and they don't have problems, you want that, I promise. You want them to just be inside sleeping that off as opposed to outside sleeping that off. If they are obviously dangerous, and this doesn't matter when they show up, if they show up at 5 o'clock or they show up at 8 o'clock, if they're obviously dangerous, too drunk to be in a facility, to live in a community, then they won't be allowed to stay. And if they can't leave civilly, then that's when we might have to engage a police officer. We don't have to do that very often at all.
Thank you.
Questions for April? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
I just have some things to add to that. So 988 is the response that we can use for mental health when we see people undressing in Main Street. And I do think we could push that messaging more. It's something to study at council retreat. I know Councilmember Ball missed our budget meeting, and I don't know if you watched it on YouTube, but we have paid for a plan to study this. It was $100,000, and we have an action plan. And you probably haven't been going to the One Norman meetings, but our community has said that they want us to use the plans we pay for to address the issues in our community.
Not the community members I've talked to.
It's not your time to speak. So, I would like to explore extending the shelter with everything that we've talked about. It sounds like 90 days. is the length of time it will take to get the next iteration up and running, hopefully.
Okay. There's obviously no motions, what,
Some
yes, sir?
staff comment. So just to make sure that staff has the correct direction from council, are we simply, is the direction I think that we're going in just extending the 90-day period, no other additions to a contract?
I would like to make sure our language is very clear about our intentions moving forward, so wherever
So-
necessary.
And Anthony, I think we can identify, so far, Ms. Dozier's been very responsive to requests to ensure that the folks, before they're, getting checked in the front door, are not blocking the sidewalk, and we don't have, just car camping going on the side of the building. And we will put up signage, just making sure everybody knows public restrooms at City Hall are open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And if, wherever we can in the agreement, ensure we are better neighbors as landlords on the building. If we can include that language for the 27th, that would be great.
I think by the 27th, we'll have a better sense of kind of the plan too, and we can include all of that in the staff memo. So that'll be a public document that people can see and refer to see kind of what your plans are.
27th of June? Okay.
Yeah, since this contract expires June 30th, I think that's when we'd want to get it in front of you guys.
Yes, sir.
Just so we're on the same page, the language I like to see also is that in this night, look, I'm on the teetering on yes or no to extend this for 90 days. I'd like to see in this language written that during this 90-day period, we do the zoning change. We do all that, get the bids, get everything written out, so there's no ambiguity to what happens when we go to vote, that everything that's been discussed here today, the promises, and what we need to do going forward to make this happen, to protect everybody, okay, is also included in that vote. It's gonna be a hard pill to swallow for half the folks here, because, they've been talking to us about this problem. So I think that trust has to go that way to ensure that everything is taken care of, everything is dotted, and we address everything that we discussed here today.
Because the elimination of ambiguity does make staff's life that much easier. Honestly, it is in staff's best interest to make sure it is crystal clear.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, say we move into Porter and it's perfect and it's doing everything we want, the capacity, do we even need to do a vote to build? I mean, would we not just expand upon that? I mean, that would give us time to keep.
My opinion of that is that's where I sit. If we're gonna put a lot of money into a building, and I realize it has to be
Done anyway.
done anyway. But there are things, if we're gonna put money in there, are we looking at all the options, and is that one of the options we wanna keep? And we just haven't had time to discuss it. We know that we're up against the fence now with this particular facility, and what do we do? And that's kind of the question, more than it is the development of 718. But I think that it would be a good study session, maybe even starting it early on a study session and having just a discussion. What do we want? What are we looking for? Let everybody take those things and air them out and say, okay, maybe we don't want to go do a vote. Frankly, in my opinion, the people told us 2 years ago, no.
But they told us they wanted that more than they wanted the EOC.
Yeah.
I mean, it just barely did not pass. That was the closest one to passing.
And so,
But,
yeah.
I mean, if this building is great and our operator, April, has successes with it, then I think we could expand upon that. But if it's gonna take a minimum of 90 days to even get in, and then we don't even know we can get in that's maybe not enough time to know we could fully develop this area. If we're talking about doing ballot language in November, that might be a little tight.
So I was just gonna ask our clerk, if we work our way backwards from that November ballot date, the decision would have to be made by council, the adoption of the ordinance to set that election. It'll be snug.
Tomorrow.
Because we need permanent, we need a shelter, 100%. But do we build or do we just expand upon what we?
I think that's an excellent question.
Off the top of my head, it would be in late August, I would think, for second reading.
So that's not even time to get
60
in.
days prior, we have to have notice to the election board.
I mean, but that's up to my council, like for us to decide.
September.
October,
September,
But we
yeah,
need to
so we
move
need it
forward. We
August.
don't need to wait.
Right. I need to at least discuss, and that November thing is just a theoretical number. It doesn't have to be there. And so but we do have to do that. I'd like to at least sit down and discuss all of this, so that we can get the best answer. Because part of it'll also be with the changes that a friend's house is making now. Is that going to help the downtowners in their decision? If we had to wait, say if we had to do 6 months instead of 90 days, are we doing the right thing by leaving it there? You know, giving us some more data that we can work off. And so,
I would think so. I mean, it's already operating. And I know they don't like it, but
yeah, but
it's the best that we have, and we can't just switch it off.
I understand.
We just can't switch it off.
And that's the hard part of the whole thing. But we do need to figure that out, and I think have a discussion that we could put off for a later thing. We've got a decision to make. Do I have a decision to make today? No, it's just discussion.
No, it's just discussion on this.
So-
I mean, the next agenda, council regular meeting after tonight will be the 27th, and so,
That gives us up until the 27th that we can do. And if you want to have a study, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
no.
I lost my track. No, if you want to have a special session before then, as long as we got a few hours, that we could sit down and just discuss ideas and see what we really want to do. You don't want to do that?
Brenda doesn't like that.
Brandon doesn't like it. Okay.
No. Why did you say that?
I mean, your face
She
was
knows
like,
I'll do what you tell
Well, I
me.
know next Tuesday, you already kind of have a packed agenda, but it doesn't mean that you can't add a third item and be here till 10 or whatever. It's up to you guys.
Well, or we could, if it's a special session, we could meet up a Thursday, couldn't we?
Yeah, you
and
don't have to do it on
So,
Tuesday.
and I'm just thinking about things that would add value to that conversation, if there is draft language from Catherine and Anthony that you'd like to see and put your final fingerprints on before the 27th, that would kind of give us a target to work towards.
I think it
too.
would be nice to have more information to be able to go back to the people that talk to us and say, this is the compromise, or this is the what we can do, and how does this fly, in your opinion? So, anyway. Yes, ma'am.
I don't want to get this conversation. I mean, like, yes, we have we're thinking about putting it out to a vote of the people. So I don't want that conversation to get like muddled into the conversation about what we're currently trying to do, because I think that is a future kind of more permanent solution. Yes, it's tied up in the same, we're talking about the same thing, right? Providing shelter for, our in-house population. But also that ballot language could change based on what happens in the next several months. And there's no reason why we couldn't think about, okay, do we want a permanent location? And if that, I think about the way that the ballot language is about how we're paying for securing a permanent location. And so that may be 718, that may be somewhere else. I'm thinking that there's probably a better permanent location than 718. But I don't want that idea of a November, like, that is arbitrary at
That's
this.
conflicting.
Yeah, at this point, like, that is an arbitrary thing that we have kind of like set in, but like here today, at the end of this month, we need to approve a contract extension, or else we cease to have an operational shelter.
Understood.
So like, I just want to make sure that we're just like keeping our eye on the ball for now. And I appreciate we do probably have to have a larger discussion about, in the future and permanent locations and things like that. But I think that we can do that moving forward. Like, I don't necessarily know that we have to make a decision today about
No.
November.
No, it was just a discussion, that's what.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Also agree with that, and just want to clarify, because I asked city manager about it. So the shelter question that failed, was it because it was too much ambiguity, but also was the number spot on for building a permanent facility?
It was a best estimate without a location known, so there was ambiguity to it. And it's hard to say, was it coupled with other things that just changed voter turnout? But it got more yes votes than any of the other elements of that particular ballot measure. So,
Moving forward, though, we would have some location, and 5 million, from what I understand of our conversations, wasn't far off from what it would cost to build one from the ground up.
yes, there are construction methods, steel construction, and one of the things that we looked at was the cost of building the household hazardous waste structure, a steel building. It had really high ceilings and, crazy air quality measures built into it. And we were thinking of building with a much lower ceiling and didn't need all that kind of climate control. And it was about 2.7 million. So we were thinking dollar per square foot. It doesn't need to look like a metal building at all. It could look like anything you'd want on the outside. But we did believe that we could accomplish the task with adequate square footage. And, we're learning more and more about what the actual demand for square footage would be. And of course, if 718 is an interim step, you'll have a much better idea about, yeah, that's enough square footage or that's too much square footage.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any more?
To answer your question, you could do a meeting next week in addition to your Tuesday meeting if that's your desire. You could do a Wednesday meeting, you could do it Thursday after CPT meeting's over, but, or you could just add a third item to Tuesday. It's whatever you're.
What's your pleasure, guys? You guys have got family that you take care of.
Yeah,
For
what's
keeping
our
it one
council
night.
conference on the 27th? Nothing, say nothing.
No, it's not.
It's,
Well, so
potentially.
keep in mind that like the contract extending the current lease, like,
Oh.
at that point, it's gonna be on that agenda. So,
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that
This
would
is
be
more a
one that you-
discussion on 718 and where we're
Okay.
going
Future.
and what this means and,
Yeah.
and things. And,
Could we do it at that council
There's
conference?
something on
Because
there,
like
but
the
I can't
next
remember what it
week
is. Do you-
on the
The
new fiscal year
27th?
start.
I don't have anything. I know we had talked about a potential lease agreement, but I don't know that that's gonna be ready. So,
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. The next everything,
a
yeah.
bit more lead time.
Yeah, sure.
we could do it at a time to be determined. And I understand there are kids, there are all kinds of other things we have to take care of, so. And the reason I'm rushing this is because we've got to be done by 6:15, we've got one more item. So,
Yeah, they're close.
may I close this out and we move in? Okay.
Thank you, council.
Item number 3, consideration of adjourning into executive session is authorized by Oklahoma statutes, Title 25, Section 307, B3, to discuss the acquisition of real property in conjunction with the Jenkins Avenue 2019 bond project. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn out of special session and convene into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. Motion on the floor is to adjourn out of the special session and convene into executive session. All in favor, raise your right hand. Any